Welcome to June's ECR Wednesday webinar, hosted by eLife, the series that aims to give early career researchers a platform to discuss issues important to you and your research career. Today, our speakers will discuss the support in the life sciences for preprints. The webinar will begin with the panelists sharing their stories. Then, in the second half of the webinar, we'll be putting your questions to them. To ask a question, you can type in the question box on the GoToWebinar Functions panel, or you can tweet us. We are at eLife Community using the ECR Wednesday hashtag. Finally, I'd just like to let you know that we are recording the webinar and will make it available on YouTube in the near future. Now I'll pass over to Brianne to introduce the panelists.
Thank you, Emma, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Early Career Researcher Wednesday webinar on supporting preprints in the life sciences. My name is Brianne Kent, and I'm a postdoc at the University of British Columbia, chair of the eLife Early Career Advisory Group, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. Just a word about our host. eLife is an initiative led by scientists for scientists with the mission to publish outstanding research, improve the effectiveness and efficiency of the peer review process, recognize responsible behaviors in science, and to try and expand and enrich the concept of research impact. eLife also makes it a priority to support early career researchers, and for the past 4 years has had an early career advisory group. This webinar series, ECR Wednesdays, is just one of the initiatives that eLife has launched to help support the early career community. Also, this year at eLife, we launched the eLife Ambassador Program. We recruited 150 researchers from around the world who are motivated to help promote cultural change in science. One of the ambassador groups is focused specifically on preprints, and I would like to thank Ulrich Bohm and Daniela Sattere, who are not here on the webinar today, but for their help putting together this webinar. I would now like to welcome our 3 speakers. We have with us Samantha Hindle, who's content lead at bioRxiv, co-founder of Pre-Review, and is also an eLife ambassador. We also have Mate Palfi, the community manager at Preletters, and Bernd Poole, who's a chief editor at the EMBO journal. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Over the next hour, our speakers will discuss the growing support of preprints in the life sciences. Please follow along the discussion on Twitter at eLife Community and with the hashtag ECR Wednesday. To get the conversation started, what is a preprint? Well, preprints are a version of a scientific paper that precedes publication in a peer-reviewed journal. By uploading a preprint to a server such as arXiv or bioRxiv, scientists can share their research with the scientific community immediately. They receive feedback from the community prior to publication and establish a permanent DOI for their research as soon as it's ready to share. Although preprints have long been popular in many scientific fields such as physics, only recently have preprints started to catch on in the life sciences. For example, arXiv was launched back in 1991 and is used predominantly for physics, mathematics, computer science, and statistics fields. It currently has almost 1.5 million preprints on the server. In contrast, bioRxiv was only launched in 2013 as a server for the biologies and life sciences. And we are up to about 1,500 monthly submissions, but still nothing compared to the magnitude of arXiv. As preprints are building momentum in the life sciences, many scientists still fear negative consequences, such as, can I publish in a journal X if I upload my work to a preprint server? The good news is that universities, funding agencies, and journals have started establishing policies accommodating preprints in the life sciences, which is encouraging more scientists to submit preprints and encourages more open science. For example, at eLife, authors have always been encouraged to use preprint servers before submission or while their paper is under review. Back in January 2016, eLife was among one of the first journals to participate in bioRxiv's direct transfer initiative, which means that authors could post their preprint to bioRxiv and then submit the materials directly to the journal. And now eLife makes it possible to submit the work first to eLife and then post the manuscript directly to bioRxiv, so authors don't even need to re-enter submission data or upload their manuscript twice. Back in 2016, we hosted an ECR Wednesday webinar on preprints called What's the Deal with Preprints? The webinar can be found on our YouTube channel if you're interested. And we hope today will be an update about how momentum is building for preprints in the life sciences. We will now open the floor to our speakers. Each will be asked to address how journals, universities, or other platforms are supporting preprints in the life sciences. Up first is Samantha Hindle. Sam is an eLife ambassador and content lead at bioRxiv and co-founder of prereview.org. Sam has seen the benefits of working openly and is passionate about enabling policy changes that will align the current academic culture with open science practices. Take it away, Sam.
Okay, thank you, Brianne. Okay, so I'm just gonna share my screen. Okay, so thank you, Brianne, and the rest of the organizers for hosting this call, and also for giving me the opportunity to share the work that we've been doing at Pre-Review to increase the use of preprints. So I'm particularly excited about being on this call because when we started Pre-Review, we were all early career researchers ourselves. And so I'm hoping that while the early career researchers that are on this call will be inspired while they hear about what we've been doing over the past year, and that they will get together and take action and try to drive some of the changes that they would like to see in their academic environment. So as Brianne mentioned, I'm an eLife ambassador, but I'm also one-third of, I'm one-third of a fantastic team. And together, Daniela, Monica, and myself have been working really hard to try and shift the culture in academic publishing. And one of the ultimate goals that we have is a little bit like every day when you wake up. So you eat your breakfast, you drink your coffee, and you brush your teeth, well, hopefully. And so you do these all as defaults every day. And so what we're hoping is that in the future, all scientists will post, read, and engage with preprints as default. And so what we realize that that's quite an ambitious goal, but we're being quite realistic, and we're trying to start, step by step in small steps. And so what we're focusing on is we're trying to increase the awareness and confidence in preprints by encouraging researchers to read and really engage with preprints. And so we're focusing on the incentives for authors to post preprints. And so one of the main benefits of preprints, as Brianne was mentioning, is that the authors can get feedback on their manuscript and improve it before publication. But unfortunately, preprint feedback is not that common at the moment. And so on bioRxiv, for example, only about 8% of preprints have associated comments. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to make preprints more mutually beneficial so that not only the readers benefit from preprints, but also the authors. And so we're trying to encourage the use of preprints in journal clubs. So journal clubs are meetings that are hosted all around the world, and they bring together scientists from different career stages to discuss new research. And so they're really an ideal environment and opportunity to capture the viewpoints of a broad group of experts. And so what we've been trying to do is try and make this process easier by developing resources that are on our platform to help researchers start a preprint journal club, and also to guide them through the review process so that it will be easier and more efficient, and they're more likely to provide that feedback for authors. And so these preprint journal clubs can be hosted locally, or something that we've also been trying to pioneer is the live online preprint journal clubs. And so this makes preprint journal clubs even more inclusive because anyone from anywhere in the world can join the online discussion. And so preprint journal clubs are really a win-win situation because the authors benefit from the feedback, the community benefits from an improved version of the manuscript, but also by writing up the review, this then tackles another problem with the current publishing system. And that is that even though peer reviewing is a really critical part of a researcher's career, not that many researchers are actually trained in the peer review process. And so what we're developing at Pre-Review is an interactive peer review training program. And this is based on the really successful Mozilla Open Leadership Program. And I can tell you a little bit more about that at the end if you're interested. But basically how it will work is that we will pair up trainees with an expert mentor, so like a journal editor, for example, and they will have, on alternate weeks, they will have one-to-one calls to get feedback on the peer review process on a task that we've set in a previous community call. So we're supplementing these one-to-one calls with community calls where we'll bring in experts from the journal editors to kind of help develop their training. And the real beauty about this program is that it's going to be fun and engaging and interactive. And so that just like with the Mozilla program, it really encourages the trainees to keep and stick with it and become trained at the end. And the other great thing is that it's self-sustaining, which means that after the first cohort have been trained, they can then become mentors in the subsequent rounds, and then this can go on, so on and so forth, so that we end up with a large community of trained early career researchers. And so then the next vision is that these trained early career researchers can then contribute to the community review of preprints, post them online on Pre-Review so that they get exposure, and then we can connect these experienced peer reviewers with journal editors so that they will hopefully then get the incentive by being invited to the formal peer review process. So to enable this, we are now moving forward to develop a new platform, so Pre-Review 2.0. Oops, sorry. Oops. And so, okay, sorry, I'm not sure what happened there. But basically we have Pre-Review 2.0 is our new platform, and this is basically, we're building this to be completely open source, so that, and the idea is to build the platform with the community in mind. So we're building a community, and then the technology is going to match that community to help sustain it. So look out for that hopefully in the fall. And what the last slide was going to show you is that, can you still see my screen, by the way?
You can see your screen, but not the slides.
Don't know where. Okay, can you see them now?
Yeah.
Okay, great, sorry about that. So basically, we have the link here to our platform, so that's prereview.org, where all our resources are housed to help you set up a preprint journal club, and also how to write the peer review. And here's our email address so you can contact us, and then our Twitter handle, and then some links to some useful resources. And I would particularly recommend signing up for the Mozilla Open Leaders Training Program. And that's it, thank you.
Thank you, Sam, that's great. So our next speaker is Mate Palsy. Mate is Community Manager at Preletters. His main task is to build and maintain the Preletters site and to support the team of researchers at Preletters who contribute highlight content to the site. He is excited to see how preprints will shape the future of publishing. On to you. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Brianna. Thanks for inviting me to this webinar, and hello to everybody who's watching. So I started 1 month ago as a community manager for Preletters. So Preletters is a community platform for selecting, highlighting, and commenting on preprints. And it was launched just 4 months ago by the company of biologists. So first I want to talk a bit about the motivation of launching Preletters. So I guess all of you know, who are following the preprint literature and in the life sciences, that preprints have been like almost exponentially, the number has been exponentially growing over, I think this is this slide yet. So since its launch in 2013. And of course, this is great for the community that we have more and more preprints, as authors are noticing that it really has a lot of benefits, but it also makes it very challenging for us scientists to navigate this literature. And this was one of the main incentives of Preletters, to build a service that would help scientists find the most interesting preprints. And the other motivation is also similar to what Sam mentioned, that there's really very little commenting so far on bioRxiv and on preprints. So you mentioned that there's only about 8%. And we also noted that this is an issue, and there was of course some discussion happening on Twitter, but we really wanted to make a platform where we can discuss preprints. So yeah, we can now swap to a slide. So here I'm just showing you how a preprint highlight looks like. So what I didn't mention is at the very heart of Prelight is the early career researcher community, and these are were first selected by our editors and editorial board members, but actually now we have a call for new Prelighters to join. And so these are PhD students, postdocs, and young PIs who write these preprint highlights. And so here you can also see that you can see the image of the preletter. If you will click on it, you will also see the profile and see what the scientist is working on. And all these prelights contain all the information about the preprint, and then they give a background. So as you can, the way you can view these prelights is like news and views type of articles for preprints. So they give a general background about the field, they describe the key findings, and then what's really interesting is that we also asked our prelighters to give their personal view and perspective on the work. So they really tell their own opinion and why they found this work interesting. And another really interesting feature is that we ask them to engage with the preprint authors. So they ask questions about the work, and then they also then get very often comments from the authors and reply to these questions. So if we swap one slide, you can see an example of what a author response looks like. So here, the first and last author of the preprint replied to the questions of this preletter. And I think this is really interesting also for the reader to read these extra insight into the work. But it's what we've seen is that also our preletters really enjoy this interaction with the preprint authors. And preprint authors are really excited that their work is being picked and highlighted. So I think this is a really positive feedback we got. So last, I want to talk about the community aspect of Prelight. So if we go again to the next slide. So we have this, can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so we have, as I mentioned, this group of early career researchers, and we really find that as a really important task that we promote them and support them as much as we can and help build their profile on our website. And one way how we're doing this is by making interviews with these prelighters. And in these interviews, they discuss about their career, also their opinion on preprints and their experience with the Prelight project. So this is yeah, a really fun way to hear their opinion. Another fun thing is that we have a Slack works for our prelighters where much of the discussion happens. And this is where they also coordinate which prelighter will highlight which preprint. Recently, there's been a lot of also discussions through this Slack on preprints, and prelighters are coordinating to meet up as conferences. And so it's really fun to see this community and all the discussions happening. So just to sum up, I think so far it's been a super positive experience. Prelight, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from the community, and I'm really looking forward to how this will shape the future of publishing and preprints in general.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction into your work. Our final speaker is Bernd Poole. Bernd is the chief editor at the EMBO Journal, which is the journal for the European Molecular Biology Organization. And he'll tell us a bit about how EMBO is supporting preprints. Take it away.
Okay, great. So let me see if I find the... Hi, so I want to tell you a little bit about how journals interact with preprints. Can you see the slides?
We can, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I'm basically the chief editor of EMBO Journal, but we publish 5 different journals that are basically covering all areas of the biological sciences that are partially open access. 2 of them are open access and 2 of them are hybrid journals. And we basically try to be responsive to the community. All that EMBO does is trying to support the community to do research more effectively and more efficiently. So this is, for us, preprints are a very important extension of that concept. So I want to illustrate a little bit in this very short talk the value as we see it in preprints and how our policies are trying to encourage preprints, how we actually see preprints and journals synergizing rather than competing as is often imagined. And then an important point is how far we want to apply filters to preprints to ensure that quality assurance is maintained. So preprints I would like to see in a bigger picture of open science. Over here in Europe, we have a very rapid movement towards full open science. This top-down mandate by the European Union and also all the major national governments. They've recognized, and this came really out of the human genomics explosion, where, for example, in the Human Genome Project, Craig Venter's shotgun assembly really relied on the 24/7 release from the Human Genome Project, and that in turn accelerated that project dramatically and made it much more cost effective. So this really was embraced very fully here in Europe also, and sharing has ever since been on the agenda. And in 2 years, we're meant to be fully open science, and we think preprint plays a big part. So we are already part of EMBO, and EMBL hosts a lot of databases that you can see on this slide, and others from the NCBI also. So we're already used to posting in structured databases, but you can see there is a huge number of journals out there, about 30,000 journals, and we see preprints as capturing science on the way into these journals to accelerate dissemination really quite dramatically, by some estimates about 5-fold actually. There's a modeling study that was just released that estimates a 5-fold increase in the sharing of science through preprints on their way to journals. One big criticism is that, or one big concern is that biologists are really not used to this, that physicists are a much smaller community, they all know each other, and sharing is much safer. But there's actually very little evidence for that. There's been a huge survey just published that actually shows that biologists are among the most sharing people in all of these communities. So I think biologists are used to sharing things, maybe not in preprint form like physicists, but certainly pre-publication. We think preprints are hugely important for young scientists in particular, because they bridge this very important gap between your postdoc and your next postdoc or your PI positions, where you fall off the sort of the 3-year funding cycle. And preprints allow you to document your research achievements in a formal way that you can use in your job applications. And that's something that is crucially important, and why we think particularly young people should embrace preprints. Okay, so what are journals doing about this? We think it's actually an important thing, positive thing for journals, because it allows us to depressurize the system. A lot of problems we see at the journal level is with people rushing into print to get their paper out at all costs before their postdoc runs out. And this will allow us to dissociate the dissemination from the research evaluation and peer review, to take more time to do things properly, basically. And we really hope that makes a big difference. Now, we have a couple of policies to sum up that we really think start to encourage preprints. The most important one, oops, I think I just came out of my slideshow, so let me try this again. The most important one is that that preprint posting does not preclude subsequent journal submissions. So we will not take a preprint to count against conceptual advance of your submitted paper. So you can't self-scoop yourself. And that's true for almost all biology journals now. You have to take a little bit care with the chemical literature and the medical literature that's a bit behind, but almost everyone I'm aware of has embraced this concept now. So that's not a concern anymore. Preprints by others, we do not count against the submission either. We see preprints as an extension of dissemination of your unpublished work at conferences, which we also don't hold against you when you submit your paper. So another lab cannot scoop you by publishing a preprint either. Now, this is maybe a bit more edgy if you want, so you have to be a bit careful with other journals on this, but this is something that is emerging very rapidly as a concept. We have also now at EMBO, we've always had what we call a scooping protection. Essentially, you cannot be scooped by anything that's published after submission of your paper during revision or the peer review process. We've now extended that to preprint posting. So from the day you post your preprint, it doesn't matter what else is published. All you have to do is cite it. And that brings me to the final point, which is preprint citation. We have a formal citation format now, which tags a citation as a preprint, but it's formally embedded in the reference list. And we actually have a policy to request citation of preprints where appropriate. We also have a dataset citation format, which is equally policed now. We have a one-click journal to preprint and preprint to journal submission process. So all it takes is one click literally when you submit to EMBO journal, and it's posted on the preprint. We have cross-linking between preprints and journals, and we're working on versioning to have a really seamless versioning control between preprints and journals in the future, which is very important, I think. So this is how the submission looks like. You can see you just click a button and it's posted as a preprint, and at the bottom of the slide you can see the citation format. We think it's important to tag a preprint citation formally as a preprint because it's of course not peer-reviewed, and we shouldn't forget that's different. So now the final point I wanted to quickly make, as I'm running out of time, now we see preprints as formal research objects, and if we want them to be taken seriously, we think they should be treated just like papers. So we have to think about reproducibility also at the preprint level and what quality control and ethics checks we want to start applying. We also have to think about how we integrate data formally into preprints and how to enhance the discoverability. I told you there's 30,000 journals out there. We have to find ways to find this stuff. So one thing is we have an internal quality control process at the journals. I'm not going to go into details, but we basically do ethics checks for all kinds of things, such as image manipulation. We want to move this upstream in our system. So when you submit a paper to our journal and you co-post it on a preprint, we can already apply these checks to the preprint posted. Okay, so this is an important thing, that we don't do things in series at preprint and journal, but we try to have a singular process that adds these quality control measures because they're very, very time intensive. The second point I want to make, and then I'm going to finish, is that we have a very interesting search technology that we are starting to apply to the literature, which is crucial because we're publishing 3 million papers a year. If you now add all the preprints on top, it's absolutely essential that we develop technology, and we have developed an AI-powered search algorithm that's called source data, which basically, in a nutshell, finds specific experiments within papers, and we're extending that now to preprints, so that hopefully in the future you can find specific experiments within preprints too, because nobody browses preprints. You have to find this stuff through aided technology. And I think we're going to stop there and take questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much to our speakers for those introductions. So please ask your questions in the question box, and also post on Twitter with the hashtag ECR Wednesdays, and we can follow along with the questions. Just to get us started, I have a question for Bernd, actually. You had just mentioned that quality control checks that you were doing at EMBO on preprints. I'm just wondering, what does that process look like, and what happens if you were to find some kind of data manipulation in a preprint?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. At the moment, we basically have this process only after peer review. So we basically send things out for peer review. If we find they're essentially ready for publication, we undertake a process that takes about 1 to 2 hours, where we look at the statistics in the papers, try to ensure the basic reporting is followed, the ethics of the experimentation, especially important for animal experiments and human data. But then the most problems we find is with image manipulation. So 1 in 5 of our otherwise publishable papers show some form of image aberration, which could be mistakes, usually mistakes we can rectify, which is why this is so important. And of course, in rare cases, also things that are much more serious. And then it takes really a lot of time. So in a few cases where people are really trying to manipulate things. So we do think it's important, because the numbers are fairly high, that we try to apply these processes as much as possible. This is not really scalable to the huge volumes of preprints, so we're working on automation as much as possible. So at least to have a pre-screen, there's technologies now on basic screening for statistics and some level of image aberrations. This is developing extremely rapidly. So we hope to apply slightly more automated methods to that. Again, it's not to do peer review. It's very important to remember that we're not trying to reinvent journal publishing in preprints, because that would defeat the purpose entirely. So we need to find a sort of sweet spot where we filter out the really dodgy stuff, because we shouldn't forget that journalists see preprints, the public see preprints, they don't always know the difference. So there is a responsibility on us, especially with human data, to make sure things are reported properly.
And so then it would get flagged on the preprint as a comment?
Oh, sorry, you asked me what to do about it. At the journal level, so this is something we need to discuss at the preprint with the preprint services, so that Cold Spring Harbor Labs. At the journals, we will either report, so we have 3 different levels. At the small and the cosmetic level, we will rectify it with the authors and then post the corrected version. At the sort of serious level, we report it to the institution of the authors and work with them to usually rectify it. At the very serious level, we will actually not publish the paper. And I think we need to find a format to retract preprints or to block publication of preprints upstream even. That has not been agreed yet, so that's something that needs to be discussed.
Great, thanks for that.
If I could follow up on that, I'd just say that this is something that we are considering. If I'm putting my my bioarchive hat on at the moment, we are considering ways to tackle these kind of situations. So, I mean, if it's a very simple change to the manuscript, then obviously they can post a revision and that kind of self-corrects. But if it is more serious, then we're currently going to be rolling out like a withdrawn article type, and so that will allow various ways to either withdraw the manuscript but leave the previous version and put like a posting up to flag that there's some issue with the previous version, or in very, very serious cases we could remove the article if we needed to. So we are discussing this internally. So
great. My next question is for Mate. You mentioned that there's about 8% of preprints on bioRxiv that have some kind of comments. And Sam, you might know more about this too. What's the percentage for archive? So because I always see the archive as kind of the goal for bioRxiv, the standard. What percentage do you know of what percentage of preprints on archive have comments?
Yeah, that's a good question. Unfortunately, I don't really have the stats, but from what I've seen, it's not too common to put comments on the archive. So I think this is just mainly used for putting their work out as fast as possible. And now, basically, what I've heard is that almost like physicists mainly look at the archive like the first place when they look for new literature. But I don't think there's also too much commenting happening there. I think this is a general problem that there's not much commenting.
Okay.
Can I add a quick note to that? On the so on archives, they actually on the physics archives they decided not to allow classical commenting as we know it, because they have actually found that a lot of the commenting happens peer-to-peer directly through email, or maybe now extended to the Twitter sphere if you want. There's not a really tradition of using article level commenting. So that's an interesting thing that we did that in biology, and the commenting I think is actually fairly reasonable level. It's growing as we speak, but a lot of it happens really invisible to the general public, I think, and that doesn't devalue preprints. That it's not that visible. There's huge amount of peer-to-peer content.
And what I would just add, even though it's 8% on bioRxiv, the number of posts of manuscripts has massively increased over the past 5 months, but yet that level of commenting has kind of stayed at about 8 to 10%. So really the amount of commenting is increasing, but the number of preprints is also increasing. So it's just kind of trying to maintain that level. So that's encouraging.
It's encouraging. We have a question from one of our attendees. He says, my PI is skeptical about posting preprints because it could cause a loss of citations. People will cite the preprint instead of the future journal article. What can I reply to my PI to push forward the idea of publishing a preprint? I think that's a great question.
Yeah, it's a really good question.
Does anyone?
Try it.
I mean, one thing I would say is that Google Scholar at the moment, they do merge citations. So if on your CV, for example, you wanted to bring those two together, so your preprint and your final published version, you can merge the number of citations. So you won't really remove or decrease the number of citations for your overall manuscript. If anything, you're going to increase the number of citations because you can your work can be cited sooner rather than waiting for publication.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just let me add to that. The journals are, of course, if you want, as worried as you are about this, because for better, for worse, we were actually part of this San Francisco Declaration calling out the problem of impact factors, but we all know that they are important in research assessment, so we know exactly what you mean. We are trying to work on ways to bundle these citations much more formally. So Google Scholar does handle it, which is great. The Clarivate, which publishes the impact factor, does not yet bundle this information, and the journals usually don't either. So this is something that's not just on preprints, it also affects PubMed Central, for example, where your manuscripts are also published automatically nowadays. And citations can go to all of these different levels of output. So we need to, and web access, which also matters as much as citations. So we need to bundle these things back together, as Samantha said. I think that's very important, and it will happen.
Great. Just a comment actually from Jessica Polka, who's joining us. And she said there are no comments on archives. So maybe that is a difference between archive and bioarchive, and that we're trying to encourage comments for pre-peer review, but on archive they don't actually have comments. So our next question is, they say, thank you so much for the introduction and talks and for all of the important work you're doing for open science. Their question is, do you think supporting preprints make it more difficult or easier for larger reform to journals? Do you envision the role of academic journals changing in the long term? That's a really interesting question. Bernd, you spoke about that a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, so large or small, I think, you know, the journal publishing is changing very rapidly. We think journals have to evolve. We are very much living in the past, and it's not just the journals that are old-fashioned. It's also the authors publishing in the journals that are old-fashioned. The whole system is extremely old-fashioned because it's always circulating around impact factor-based research assessment. That makes everyone very scared of doing anything out of the box. So I think it will take some activation energy, and we're getting that. At least in Europe, there is mandates now for this, so we need that catalysm to get things going. But it's happening. So we really see this synergism I tried to illustrate of journals and preprints, where we shouldn't just destroy journals which have developed certain mechanisms that are very important, such as peer review, which is something that is intrinsically very, very powerful. We can certainly improve it, and we're trying very hard to improve it. But we should develop new layers that help us disseminate information in a more efficient way without throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Now, journals are worried, of course, because the journals used to have the monopoly of sharing science, and they had embargoes so that journalists were not allowed to attend conferences, so they would see the news first at journals. All this has to stop, and has stopped largely. There's a few old-fashioned journals, I won't name names, they often have short names, that have still got these old-fashioned embargoes and so on, trying to protect these things, but it's all going away very rapidly. Now, what we should not forget is that peer review does add quality control, and we should make sure the public understands what things have been vetted, what things are reproducible, and what things are shared, you know, with the caveat of not having been quality controlled and vetted. So I think it's important to find ways, and that's why our citation format, for example, has the preprint tag that clearly labels it as a preprint. It's not to say this is bad science, it's simply to say, be aware this hasn't been peer reviewed, so you have to make up your own mind.
If I could quickly add to that, I'd just say that one thing that we envision, at least from pre-review's perspective, is just building on what Bernd was saying about how journals can improve the peer review process. And what we've been trying to do with pre-review is to involve more voices in that process. And so kind of really involving early career researchers, because this can add a huge amount of diversity and increase the reviewer pool too, because that is what can often slow down the peer review process and make the whole process of publishing slower, because the pool of reviewers is smaller, it's hard to find a reviewer, and often the same reviewers are constantly getting asked, and that puts an extra burden on researchers too. So if we can train up early career researchers and display their reviews so that editors can be confident in their abilities, then they can start being integrated into the peer review process.
We're totally with you on that, Samantha. So that's great. I mean, we would love to have even a bi-layered peer review process where we have a more technical level of peer review, which is essentially the domain of the postdocs. They're actually much better often than PIs at that. And then maybe also have a sort of supervisory level of people who have experience, who can place more the interest of work and so on. So to try to combine these advantages of both systems. And you know, preprints are again great because you're applying the stuff upstream. So by the time it hits the journals, hopefully, it's just a matter of saying yes or no to the paper, and it goes in without 5 rounds of revision and 2 years of delays. So keep up the good work. It's great.
Thanks.
So a question related actually is, what stage do you recommend uploading a manuscript as a preprint?
I mean, I would say as early as you feel comfortable, and so as early as possible, really. I mean, the sooner you post your preprint, the sooner you can get feedback, and the quicker that can be incorporated and to improve your manuscript before publication. So, I mean, for some, as we've created these services from bioRxiv, between bioRxiv and the journals, for example, you know, that can happen at submission, and that's a nice early point too, but even earlier would be better. So.
With the caveat that it is forever on the internet. So remember that you want the quality.
Yeah, but that's also the advantage with preprints, right? That you can always upload a new version of it. So people will always be able to see the most recent version if you realize that something was maybe not right, or if you have newer data to add. So
yeah,
and it also drives. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So I'm also all for uploading as soon as possible your work.
And it also drives the community scientists to get involved in reviewing the preprints, because if it becomes the norm that everyone is submitting preprints much earlier, then they know that their contributions and their hard work in writing up these reviews is actually going to be worthwhile. Whereas at the moment, people don't really know whether the manuscript is already kind of quite far through the peer review process, and therefore the incentive to actually provide that feedback is much smaller.
But if the quality is lower, that people aren't going to be wanting to peer review. They're going to feel like it's a waste of time to review something so early in the process, something sloppy or something that's not organized and not edited would be.
I mean, I still think you should wait to post until it's ready, but maybe just kind of wait a little bit before you submit to the journal, so that you have a little bit of time to have feedback. So, you know, early doesn't necessarily have to mean sloppy and not ready. It's just, you know, you're confident in your results, you've written up a good summary of them, and then you're ready to submit to the preprint server.
Yeah, I think will also help in the, sorry. I think will also help in the future if there will really be a tag on the preprint, and people will know whether it was uploaded prior to submission to a journal or after submission. Because, yeah, I think that also, if I think about Prelights, it would also help our Preletters maybe take those that are not like 1 week away from publication.
Okay. I mean, let me make one quick point also. I see it really as an extension of presenting work at a conference. So just think of it like that. I mean, if you're confident to stand up in front of 500 people and talk about your work, which you should be doing with unpublished work, by the way, that's also getting more and more rare, then you're ready for preprint too. I think it's just an extension of that in a more formal way. I would strongly also endorse what Samantha said. It's publishing early doesn't mean sloppy necessarily. Think of your work as units of experiments. So maybe each figure individually, each figure has to be reproducible and fully quality controlled. You know, you need to have all the methods there to allow others to reproduce the work. So it has to be a formal unit of science, but it doesn't have to be necessarily a fully fledged paper with all the bells and whistles of a full research paper with 8 figures. So you know, each individual experiment needs to be solid. You have a responsibility not to mislead people, of course, but you don't need to work towards that really extensive cell paper before you think you can share, I think.
One question for Bern. Have preprint comments been used in the editorial evaluation at EMBO or any other journals that you know of?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question too. There are certain journals that are really looking quite routinely at preprints, and our preprints are exploding as we speak in exponential growth, as was said. So it's actually very hard to systematically look at them. But our editors, so we have editors that have specific subject domains. They do go into preprints and look at what's cooking, basically, if you want. As an extent, we also go to conferences to look what's interesting. So they do dip in. And when there are comments on the preprints, of course, you have a look, but we don't systematically look if there's comments, maybe critical comments that allow, you know, that would give us a reason to reject a paper. No, not at all. It's more if things are, and we're particularly excited about pre-flights there actually, because that is actually people that take a lot of time to comment on a preprint. You know, and there it's not just the sort of gung-ho 3-line comments saying great work, fantastic, you know, that's not really helpful for editors. But if it's a thorough evaluation like a news and views, then it really helps the editors place the work. So I think that can really change the ball game. If pre-flights becomes more systematic, we will probably look at those first, basically. And so it could become a bit of a shopping mall, the whole thing, that journals are actually going in and encouraging authors to submit. They will look at the pre-flights comments, and they will look at the referee comments, maybe that are done by PRE. So it's a whole marketplace, if you want, that's emerging there, which could be very interesting. But at the moment, it's not really used very much. No, it's just starting.
Okay, great. That ties us into the next question from Mate. How do you become a pre-lighter? We've had a couple of people ask.
Yeah. So actually now we have a call for new pre-lighters. So we're actually especially would like to expand in new areas where we currently don't have any people. These would be like systems biology, microbiology, neurobiology, and bioinformatics. But we're actually open to also if people would like to cover other areas. And we have now, so as I said, an application, and all we want is a person to write kind of a mock pre-light and then send it to us, and then we will see. This is also a test of their commitment, because we also want people that sign up that they would write one pre-light every month or every 2 months. So yeah, look at the Prelights website and send us an application. I would like to say that I think this is actually a really great opportunity for young scientists to practice their writing, and also it's a good motivation to read in their field, but also a bit outside of their field. And we also are very happy to give writing feedback and editorial feedback to their pre-light posts. And of course, there's also the network part, and that you join a nice community of people.
Fantastic. Our next question is for Sam. You mentioned live preprint journal clubs. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we're really excited about launching that, and one that we did recently went really, really well. And the idea is that really anyone anywhere in the world can join, and it's just like a community call like we're doing right now. And what we do is we also, they don't have to join, but we invite the authors to join too, or one or two of the authors. And that's great because it means that you can get you can directly give your feedback to the authors and get their feedback and ask them questions about their rationale and like how they did things. And so when you think about a traditional journal club, you're asking the host of the journal club, and they don't really know the answers as to why the authors did this, that, and the other. So it's a really nice kind of novel aspect to preprint journal clubs. And like I said, it's very inclusive, so anyone can join from anywhere in the world. So for example, if you happen to be in an institution where there aren't that many people in your field, and it's hard to kind of bring people together for a journal club, you can ask us to get involved, and we'll help to advertise the live preprint journal club that you want to do, and help you get participants from all over the world that can join the discussion. And the way that we also do it to kind of make it even more sort of inclusive and thinking about different personalities is we have the call structure to it, and where you can vocalize your thoughts and your questions. But we also integrate like a collaborative writing tool, so like Etherpad, for example, or we could do it through Google Docs even. And that allows people to kind of just type down their comments and their questions, so they don't have to vocalize if they don't want to, if they're not comfortable with that. And the way we tend to structure it is we host the call, and we have various questions, and so we run through that, and we've been trained as the Mozilla Open Leaders course to do these kind of calls. And so we ask the authors to kind of stay quiet for most of the call unless they're specifically asked a question, and then at the end we give them kind of 10 minutes to kind of talk about things a little bit more and answer some questions and that kind of thing. So that makes it seem slightly less awkward having the authors there, because they're just kind of quiet a little bit. And it's running really well. So if you're interested and you want some help to start one, just give us an email.
That information preserved, Samantha?
Yeah, so that's the great thing as well about the Etherpads, which is what we've been using. They're just a link, and they remain. And we're also encouraging people, obviously, to then incorporate those comments, just copy and paste them and put them on pre-review as well as an actual review in itself. So that's a really cool thing about it, because it's digital, it's all written down, and then the host of the call can just copy it and reformat it, and they've got a review within like an hour. So yeah.
Great, so we're down to the last few questions. The next one is actually mentioned by Daniela. Sam, could you mention how authors of preprints can solicit reviews, trying to gain feedback? And I also just want to ask Mate whether or not Prelights can do the same thing. Can authors reach out and say, we'd like our preprint to be highlighted or discussed or reviewed? So first, Sam, did you want to just expand on what Daniela had mentioned?
Yeah, so what we're developing right now is a way that our new platform is going to have a button, basically, that authors can click to solicit a review. And so then they will click on the button, and then they'll put in the DOI, for example, of, say, the bioarchive preprint. And then this will end up being listed on a page for preprints that authors want reviews of. And so it's really as simple as that. Currently, if anyone wants to solicit something, they can email us, and then we can put out a call for to get reviewers involved. And authors can also contact us, which some have already, to ask us to host a live preprint journal club too. So it can work that way as well.
Yeah, so about Prelights, so we haven't had this so far, this feature that authors can send their preprints. This is definitely what we have to think about in the future, but so all our prelighters select their preprints themselves. So I think it can be more common that somebody would contact them and ask whether they think that preprint is worthy or they find it interesting to prelight. But I think definitely it's something we have to think in the future if we make a call for authors that they should send their preprint to us.
Great. Okay, so we have a couple of questions. I'm going to combine them. Does anyone know about how much, are there any statistics, or has there been any research in looking at the preprint compared to the published journal article, and how much the article changes in that time? Has anyone looked at that?
So we have not formally looked. I mean, I can just say that our policy is that to make a preprint count for our what I described as scooping protection, it has to be substantially the same as the paper. Of course, I mean, what we can't have is a situation where you post like one figure of the paper and then to buy yourself time, basically, you know, and then wait 2 years before you submit the rest, so you sort of have your cake and eat it if you want. So we haven't yet formally looked. I can only say anecdotally, for all the preprints that come over, they've essentially been substantially the same as the submission. Of course, during peer review, the paper changes substantially. Usually, there's at least a few figure panels that are added in revision to a paper before it's published. So the published paper is usually quite far evolved. I don't know, there must be statistics on how many versions preprints on bioarchives have now. It's actually growing, I think, the number quite a lot.
Yeah, I forget, I mean, what the average is for the number of revisions like per manuscript, but I think about 29% of manuscripts on bioarchive have revisions. What degree they're revised is variable. Sometimes it's just, you know, a few bits here and there. Sometimes it's just changes in the authors. But sometimes there are new panels added, so it's quite variable.
And just a final quick question, which we touched on a little bit earlier. Can preprints be retracted? Do we know what the process is for on the archive? Because you had mentioned that bioarchive is still kind of working that system out. But do we know what it is on archive? Can they be retracted?
I'm not. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Ben.
Well, I think the whole point is that it's not easy to retract a paper. I mean, we get this actually quite a bit. So we have a very, in big red writing actually saying, you know, because we have this co-posting, co-submission, co-posting, and it's just a click of a button literally to post your preprint. And that's sometimes a culture shock for people. They just click it by chance and think, can I retract the paper? I'm getting really nervous now. And no, you can't actually. The only way to retract it is to have a substantive argument that you have found out your own paper is flawed, and you have to make a scientific argument about that, or if you detect fraud in your own study and so on. So there's no easy way to retract your paper, and of course there's a good reason for that, because we don't want it too fluid. You know, I mean, you should think carefully what you post, because others rely on that work, and you really have, it's a big step. So I think that's still being worked out, if there should be a slightly easier way. But as Mate said, there's version control, so you can certainly update your work very easily. Totally removing it, you should make up your mind before, essentially.
Great. Well, this was wonderful. I'm going to invite each speaker to provide some closing comments. Any final comments? We'll start with Sam.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I really just want to encourage early career researchers to get involved with making change in the scientific publishing sort of ecosystem. You know, that's exactly what we did with pre-review. We were just early career researchers at the time. We joined a Mozilla Working Open workshop meeting, and that's where I met Daniela. And we just had this idea. And so really what I just wanted to spend a few seconds talking about is that, you know, you can make changes. You know, you might just be one or two people, but once you get together, you discuss these things like as eLife ambassadors and just amongst yourselves, you can really make a change. And so really, I just wanted to have an inspirational message to say, just go out there, find more people who are like-minded, and, you know, really try to make a change. There's a great open science community out there who have been amazingly supportive of us, and just talk to people and you can really make a change. And if you want to talk to us about how we've done it, we would love you to get involved in contact with us, and we're open to chat to you all and start preprint journal clubs. They're a great idea.
Thanks. Okay.
I also just want to say that I'm just like so happy to see all these new initiatives coming, supporting preprints, and I'm really excited to learn about this. Also, of course, all new to me since I just started a month ago. But with Preletters, it's really amazing to see all the positive feedback coming from basically, yeah, all the members of the community. And I also really want to encourage people to apply to be a Preletter. I think it's a really great opportunity. But if they don't feel like writing, then just follow Preletters also on Twitter or on the website, because these are like really amazing young scientists, full of energy, enthusiasm, and it's also been really fun to interview them. And one of the main things is that I was really surprised when I asked about what they see as the main advantage of preprints, and I thought that at some point I would have to stop asking this question because it gets boring. But actually, all of them have like they always point out different parts why it's really what really helped them by posting a preprint. So yeah, I think that's definitely the future. So
Great. Thanks. And Bernd, any final comments?
So let me also encourage you from the journal side that try out preprints. Maybe don't try it with the work you think is most competitive, most fast moving. Try it out with something that's maybe a bit more low key. If you want to fill out the space, the journals will certainly not be against you at this point. There's some journals that are very much in favor of preprints, and certainly everyone accommodates them. I think what's very encouraging is that many of the preprints posted, they're growing exponentially. Almost everything you see on bioRxiv, for example, as one preprint server, is actually very high quality. It's actually amazing how self-selecting the system is. That's what the physicists showed us, and I think it's playing out in biology. All these concerns about people playing the system have not really come true yet. Of course, once preprint really matter for people's research careers, we have to be vigilant that we don't start corrupting the system, if you want, because at the moment it's really for sharing work, and it doesn't, journals have this problem of impact factors and so on. We should try to keep the space clean, if you want, and not have it corrupted by all these things. The other thing is we need credit systems. At the moment, to encourage people to engage with SAMs and MATES processes, and to have people post preprints, I think it has to start to matter for people's research careers ultimately, as an author, but also as a referee and writer of news and views articles and so on. So that's something that's still missing. The journals are embracing it. The funders have to embrace it now.
Well, thank you. That was a really wonderful webinar. I learned a lot. So thank you to our speakers, and thank you to everybody who tuned in today and contributed to the discussion. It was a wonderful opportunity to learn how preprints are building support in the life sciences. Our next ECR Wednesday webinar will be held July 25th, and we'll be discussing women in science. So I hope to see you then, and please continue the discussion on Twitter, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Brianne. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.